Hi, I'm Doug Struble, and this is my backyard observatory. Every clear night I possibly get, I open up to take pictures of deep space.
Hey, I'm Chuck Ayoub, and I live right up the road from Doug. I don't have a home observatory, but like Doug, I usually run 2 scopes every night.
Back in spring of 2016, Chuck and I got into this hobby, and back then we had a much simpler setup, trying to just get started out in this hobby, and over time we've gotten more sophisticated and automated some of our equipment to make our lives easier and to make our images that much better.
That's right, and this hobby is really not difficult to get into. A lot of people make the jump with equipment they already own, like a DSLR camera and a tripod.
We actually fast-tracked some of our equipment upgrades and automation a lot earlier on than we had anticipated due to our skies, but we weren't quite sure what we were going to get.
Right, we're both around 20 minutes from downtown Detroit, where the big city lights known in the astro community as light pollution can wreak havoc on deep space photos. I was even warned by the seller who sold me my camera that he wasn't sure if I'd be able to accomplish anything in my area.
This is my main rig right here. It's a Mach 1 GTO made by Astro-Physics. I had this pier custom made by a friend of mine who does metalworking. And on top of it sits an Explorer Scientific 165mm triplet refractor. It's probably the best telescope I have in terms of getting what I get, because I go after a lot of tiny objects. So I need that focal length to really get in there. On top of that rests my Orion guide scope. And then my second rig is an Atlas Pro made by Orion with a stellar view 102mm on it. This is a little bit wider, but on both systems I am running a ASI 183mm camera, which has very small pixels, so I can get in there really tight and get a good pixel scale of both of my objects. Typically, both rigs run on each 2 laptops, and both of these laptops are run from inside the house. Everything's automated once it gets set up, aside from hiccups here and there, of course. And then one thing I really do to fight light pollution is I do a lot of what's called narrowband. Narrowband is exactly what it sounds like. It's a narrow sliver of the visual spectrum, so it cuts out a lot of this light pollution that we have near the city of Detroit, and allows me to wash away a lot of that light pollution so I can really focus on the nebulosity that exists in the image.
Right, narrowband filters are a must, and when I'm not using them, my pictures can become overexposed very quickly. So I've become rather famous online for my short exposure approach. I take 15-second exposures and stack them all together, and you'd be surprised at what you can capture and get around light pollution. Hey Doug, I get this question all the time, and I'm sure you do too. How do you stay on target with your deep space objects if the Earth is rotating?
That's a good question. So in astrophotography, we use what's called a German equatorial mount. And once we get it polar aligned to Polaris, the North Star here in the Northern Hemisphere, what it does is it allows what's called the right ascension to track throughout the night. So it kind of just rotates around that North Star. And to keep it on target, you use a guide scope, which locks onto just any random star, and it will send corrections to the computer, which in turn sends corrections to the mount, to keep it on target throughout the whole night.
Right, along with the motorized mount and guide scopes and guide cameras, we use software to help us automatically find and center on our targets. Even our focus is automated, so we can be doing other things while we're imaging.
Being fully automated is great, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we don't get involved. In fact, being automated and having more complex gear means there's a lot more things to go wrong.
Right, we do get the occasional head scratching and hair pulling issues when we're trying to resolve an issue before the clear night disappears. So Doug, do you have a preference with larger or smaller telescopes?
That's an interesting point. I mean, obviously smaller telescopes are a lot less expensive, and they do great. And most of them have like a very short focal length, which means they can get a wide field of view. And most of my objects back then, I first started out with, were a wide field of view. But what my one friend Jim Renard once said, most things in the universe are small. So over the years, I've started to realize that I need more focal length. For example, in my Explorer Scientific 165mm, as a great focal length, I could really get in deep on planetary nebula and things of that sort. What do you prefer, Chuck?
I actually like using a large and wide field telescope at the same time. A lot of people like large telescopes and they think they're better, but wide field scopes can give you a great view on a large target. But I still like big, bright targets to capture. I'll leave the 100-hour targets to Doug. So Doug, when you're finished capturing an object, are you really finished with it?
That's an interesting point. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that think that we just point our telescope up in the air, take a picture, and we're done. You know, but we spend hours and hours of capturing data, and then we have to do what's called pre-processing the data, where we stack all the data, bring all of the signal out from the noise floor, and actually start to see an image grow, and then we have to polish that up. I mean, there's really no magic bullet involved. There's some processes I do in what a program called PixInsight, and there's a lot of stuff I do in Photoshop, and then sometimes I go back and forth. So to really get that final image takes hours and hours of processing the data and really teasing out that signal to get that image that we're looking for.
That's right. I think people would be surprised how much work the Hubble Space Telescope and the James Webb Telescope need before they're actually shown to the public. But there's lots of free tutorials on YouTube on how to process pictures like that. And when I'm done with my pictures, a lot of people are amazed, and they actually think my pictures are from the Hubble Space Telescope. Now here's a picture of the pillars of creation made famous by the Hubble Space Telescope, and here's my picture. I don't have the magnification of the Hubble Space Telescope, and I don't have the advantage of imaging above the Earth's atmosphere, but I'm pretty pleased with these results. Remember this scope, Doug?
Yeah, that's the old AR-102 from Explorer Scientific that I used to use for solar imaging.
That's right. I took this scope off Doug's hands. Astrophotography is not just a nighttime gig. I have a lot of fun capturing the sun. But remember, never look directly at the sun with the telescope. I have a lot of protection on here, like my Daystar Quark Solar Scout, and I have an energy rejection filter. But it's a lot of fun creating time lapses of what we see on the sun. I even like live streaming it and letting my YouTube subscribers watch the action.
That's right, Chuck. It's fun to watch people's reactions when we post some of our work online.
So be sure to follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Astrobin.